Aloha, author here with a quick aside. This is the 12th chapter of I Am Frisk and Undertale Story. If this is your first time here, there's a link to the full playlist in the description below, but for those returning, here's a quick refresher. Previously on I Am Frisk and Undertale Story. After making contact with the skeleton brothers Sans and Papyrus, Frisk engaged in a series of puzzles in order to befriend the enigmatic duo. This culminated in a climactic battle against Papyrus, where Frisk lost the fight but managed to befriend the skeleton in the process. After which, both decided to help each other become stronger so they can achieve their goals. Drop a like and subscribe if you want to see more of this story, and also feel free to ask any questions in the comments below as I'm a vampire that feeds off engagement. Enjoy!
Are you sure you're going to be okay?
Papyrus asked as he looked at Frisk's arm with concern. Yes, Papyrus, Frisk said for the third time as he adjusted his makeshift cast. It's just a broken arm. With all the food you gave me, I'm sure it'll heal quickly with some rest.
Very good. Then you may thank the great Papyrus later. For now, I will leave you to heal up. I can't have an injured rival after all.
He laughed and walked upstairs, presumably to go to his room. Frisk sighed and leaned against the couch. After rather embarrassingly being run through Snowden in a panicked Papyrus's arms, the skeleton had brought him into his house. Frisk then proceeded to be fed an absurd amount of monster food before Papyrus realized that it wasn't healing him like a normal monster, where he promptly started to freak out. Luckily, Frisk had managed to calm him down and explain that bone cracks were not as severe in humans as they were in skeletons, and that he would probably be healed soon. However, he wasn't exactly sure how long it would take him to heal a broken limb. He had recovered from his injuries before, but at least some of that was due to Toriel's healing. So just in case, he used an extra sweater from his bag and made a makeshift sling that could hold the arm secure. Now he was just sitting here awkwardly in the skeleton brother's couch while his arm pulsed with a dull pain. That monster food had filled up his aura, but he was still physically tired from the hours of walking, puzzle solving, and fighting. He should probably go to sleep, but after everything... Frisk looked down at his right hand and clenched it into a fist. He had lost that fight. Even if he had gone for the kill, he likely would not have won. He was getting better at using magic, but not fast enough. He would eventually be forced to move on to Waterfall, where he would have to face Undyne, someone who was supposed to be much stronger than Papyrus. Frisk opened his hand and concentrated on that feeling. He was weak, he needed to get stronger. He needed to light that spark of perseverance in his soul. He thought about Undyne crushing him in seconds while being utterly unable to build up any power in time. There, he could feel the burning sensation flowing through him now. He just needed to guide it. From his soul up through his chest, past his shoulders and along his arm, the energy pooled in the palm of his hand as he tried to push it into existence. It took a few seconds of sparking, but Frisk had made a small purple flame appear in his hands. Yes, he whispered out. He had never managed to actually summon flames when he hadn't already been in combat for at least a minute. This meant that he could train his perseverance to be useful even at the start of a fight, and maybe if he could learn to control it better, he could use both perseverance and justice simultaneously. What you doing, kid? Sans asked from right next to him on the couch. Frisk jerked his head back and his flame disappeared, flowing back into his soul. Sans, Frisk took a couple breaths to calm himself down. Could you please stop scaring me like that? What you talking about, kid? You just didn't notice me because you were so concentrated on your little flame there. Sans smiled, but it looked more like a smirk. I'm not trying to scare you at all. Frisk glared at the skeleton for a couple seconds before looking down at his hand. What are you doing here, anyway? Come on, kid. What does it look like I'm doing? The skeleton's voice came from somewhere to Frisk's right. I'm just feeding my pet rock. Frisk looked up to see that Sans had disappeared from his spot on the couch and was now throwing sprinkles on a rock that sat on the table by the door. I can see that, Frisk deadpanned. Oh, you meant why I'm talking to you, Sans said with fake realization. Well, to be honest, my bro would be sad if you keeled over from exhaustion when training with him. So I guess I came to check on you and ensure that you didn't kick the bucket. He looked at Frisk with another smile. Frisk looked away ashamed. He was staying in their home, and Sans had come to check on him, but his first reaction was to be snippy and suspicious of the skeleton's motives. Sorry, I guess I'm a bit tired, he tried to explain. It's no skin off my back, kid, so you're good, Sans replied with a wink. I'll be heading out. Make sure to tell Papyrus that I fed the rock when he gets back. Don't want it to get too fat. Frisk nodded his head and waved goodbye as Sans walked into the kitchen. Frisk leaned to his right and peeked into the empty kitchen. Why does he even do that, he wondered to himself. Frisk shook his head. It didn't matter. He probably just liked messing with people. The tired human decided to rest his head against the armrest and try to sleep. The next morning, Frisk yawned as he walked down the streets of Snowden, taking in his surroundings. For being such a small town, it was certainly lively. Monsters, mainly of the fuzzy variety, roamed the streets and manned the shops. There was even a Christmas tree with presents that stood in what must have been the town square. Actually, Frisk didn't even know what month it was, much less what day. The memories he had received from the original Frisk had been filtering in slowly, but he had actually been trying to mostly forget they existed. He felt terrible about taking the kid's body, but it wasn't like he had done it purposely. And from what Frisk had seen, the kid hadn't jumped down the hole for a very happy reason. Frisk shook himself out of those memories and refocused his attention on the town. Luckily, he had focused just in time because he found himself in front of the shop. It was the only place of its kind in Snowden, and Frisk was hoping to find some useful items inside. When Frisk took his first step into the place, he was already disappointed. He had hoped to find a weapon to use before summoning his spear, but it looked like this place was almost game accurate.
Hello, traveler. How can I help you? The cat monster said from behind the counter.
Sure, I was wondering if you had a staff or spear that I could buy, Frisk asked, just in case there was anything in the back.
Sorry, no can do,
He replied.
Most of our weapons get bought up by the Royal Guard quickly. The only thing I have right now are those boxing gloves.
She held up the pair in question. Those did not look like they would fit well with the fighting style Frisk was developing. At the beginning of fights, he would use his justice magic to dodge his attackers and build up perseverance. Those gloves wouldn't work very well because he wanted to keep his distance, and he would have access to a spear when he would fight at close range. That's okay, what is for sale if I may ask? There was a decent amount of other things behind the counter, but Frisk wasn't exactly sure what was for sale.
Are you looking for items or food?
The cat monster looked down at the slings Frisk armed were in. Items, Frisk answered. He didn't have any real use for food. At least not right now. He could eat in Snowden, and his arm was already feeling much better. Hopefully he could take off the sling soon.
Ah, then right now we only have this manly bandana for 50 gold.
She casually held up the orange strip of cloth. Frisk's eyes twitched. Really? That was all she had right now? How did this place run like a business? But maybe Frisk could use this opportunity to find out if the items still worked similarly to how they did in the game. I'll take it, he said, and gave the shopkeeper 50 out of the 100 gold Toriel had given him. 10 minutes later. So the items probably worked similarly to the game. When Frisk had put the bandana on, a slight orange pulse had gone through his aura, and he felt more protected. Hopefully, this meant it was making his defense higher, because if it wasn't, Frisk would never wear it. He wasn't a big fashion guy, but the bright orange bandana did not complement his lime green sweater. At least not with the cream stripes going across the chest. Frisk reached into his pocket and grabbed his phone. Looking at the clock, it was about the time that he was supposed to be meeting Papyrus at Grillby's. Frisk increased his pace and made it to the restaurant on time. He stepped into the building and was immediately met by Papyrus.
Frisk!
Papyrus called out from the booth to his right.
Come, sit!
Hey, Papyrus, Frisk said casually, looking around. Neat place. It really was. Grillby's looked like your average bar on the surface, with its card games of poker and the booths off to one side. But the real difference was the monsters. A monster with a massive mouth sat behind Frisk, mumbling something about human food. The dog sentries that tried to cut him in half were sitting around and playing poker with each other, and somehow a living flame stood behind the bar, seeming to be cleaning a glass.
Of course! Grillby's is one of the hottest places in Snowden,
Papyrus bragged like he had built the place.
Second only to the house of the great Papyrus.
Of course. Speaking of that, thanks again for letting me sleep at your place.
It's no problem, friend.
Papyrus looked back at Frisk before his jaw dropped.
Frisk, I see that you have gotten some new clothing.
Frisk glanced confusedly at the reaction, but decided to ignore it. Oh yeah, I picked this up from the shop. Does it really look weird? He looked down at the bandana.
No, of course it does not,
Papyrus said nervously, glancing down at his pocket.
I would say it looks amazing on you.
Really? Amazing? Did the skeleton like the color orange or something? Probably. He did use courage magic after all. Thanks, Frisk said as he looked skeptically at the skeleton's sweating face. Are you okay over there?
Of course,
he said unconvincingly.
Subtly changing the topic, what would you like to eat?
It wasn't subtle if you said it out loud, but Frisk sighed and let it go. I guess I'll just try the burger. Papyrus stood up.
I will go get food then,
and rushed off, leaving Frisk to look oddly after him. Why was Papyrus acting so weird? Maybe he was nervous about something? But what could that something be? Frisk thought back to his playthrough of the game. No, Frisk put his hand to his mouth in surprise. In the original game, Papyrus had met Flowey before. Fans even said so in this very place. It might be a stretch, but Frisk had been worried about Flowey's silence ever since leaving the ruins. It would be just like that flower to mess with him now. But what could Flowey say to make Papyrus this nervous? Whatever it might have been, it couldn't have been good. Maybe Frisk was looking too deeply into this and it was just Undyne or something else. Frisk will have to ask some more questions.
Here you go.
Papyrus set Frisk's plate on the table in front of him. Thanks. Frisk studied his friend sitting across the table. He definitely looked more composed. Maybe he was just overreacting. Frisk's gaze turned to his burger, studying it slightly. It looked relatively normal, which also meant it would be a pain to eat with one hand. So he slowly pulled his left arm out of the makeshift sling.
Frisk,
Papyrus looked alarmed at what he was attempting.
bone cracks are very serious.
It's okay, Papyrus. Frisk maneuvered his arm around and clenched his fist a couple times, slowly. See? Mostly healed up. It was a bit stiff and sore, but nothing too wrong. It took Frisk a couple more showings of his healed arm before Papyrus decided it was okay for him to eat with it. After taking a couple bites, Frisk decided he needed to continue the conversation. So I guess this means we can go training after this, right? He asked. With his arm mostly healed, he wanted to do something to get better quickly.
Huh?
Papyrus was back to sweating again.
Sure, I guess.
Frisk was confused. Earlier the skeleton had looked thrilled to be training together, and now he was suddenly nervous. Something was definitely going on. Are you going to be up for it? Frisk asked. You don't look too excited about the prospect. Papyrus panicked for a second before shaking his head rapidly.
Of course, the great Papyrus would never turn down an offer to train with his rival.
Great. Frisk nodded his head. We'll walk to the forest after we finish eating. Do you know any good clearings we can train in? He asked. He needed to get Papyrus alone to see what was wrong.
What?
The skeleton whispered to himself and almost seemed to shut down. Frisk wasn't going to get anything else out of his friend at the moment. After eating, it was becoming increasingly more likely that Flowey had something to do with Papyrus's weird behavior as of late. The entire walk, the skeleton had been almost shaking with nerves. Frisk even heard him mumble to himself something about flowers. Internally, Frisk was gearing up for the next fight against Flowey. If Flowey wanted to harm his friend, he would get a rude surprise. Is this the clearing? Frisk asked, looking ahead to see an open area amongst the trees. It took Papyrus a second to get out of his head.
Yes.
They made their way to the middle of the clearing in an unspoken agreement. Frisk looked around to make sure that they were alone, noticing that somehow sweat was streaming down Papyrus's face. Good. Now that we're alone, Papyrus, I have to ask you something important, Frisk began. About the...
Wait!
Papyrus yelled out as he reached his breaking point.
Frisk, while I like you very much as a friend, I am afraid I do not hold romantic feelings for you in my heart.
What? Thank you all so much for listening. A bit of a cliffhanger at the end, but I thought it would be mildly funny and a decent way to adapt the Papyrus dating storyline into something a little less dramatic. Of course, while all seems to be going fairly well, this time of peace won't last forever, so enjoy it while you can. I am fairly excited to start adapting what comes next. Also, for those of you waiting for more chapters, I've decided to adapt everything that's written first to YouTube, then move into writing more. It's not the perfect solution, but it's what I'm going to do. Adios and have a great rest of your day.